Hey guys, Hawk20 here. This is a Blender Basics video. Now, for those of you who are watching, these videos aren't intended for people who have little to no experience with 3D modeling or even Blender in general. Now, I'm not saying that those that are watching that have considerable experience or even more professional won't really get anything out of this. In fact, I actually invite you guys to participate in the comments section below since, I may not know everything and it might actually help me to learn a few things from you guys as well. So if you guys do contribute anything to the comment section, I am considerably thanking you for that. So without further ado, let's get on with this series. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Blender Basics. This is the second episode of many more to come. I know that these have been taking some time to come out, and I apologize if you guys have been waiting for this, but the reason I'm taking my time on these is I want to make sure that each episode covers a good amount of material that can help you, really get the most out of these tutorials. And I want to make sure you guys are being able to say that you can come back here if you need help, and you'll be able to see exactly how certain things are done. And that's really what I'm focusing on here. So I apologize if it's taking a long time to do these, but I want to make sure that I'm covering a good amount of material in each individual episode. So anyway, today's episode is going to be focusing on some of the basic tips and tricks to get you into modeling. Now, I'm not going to say you're going to be able to model anything at the end of this episode, but you'll be able to model some of the more basic things that are just around us today. Maybe even some of the things you might find on your desk or around your house. So, one thing I do want to mention real quick is ooh, excuse me, I knocked the mic around. It is one particular concept which is called Polycount. I'll cover this a bit more in detail later on, but I just thought I should go ahead and get this introduced to you guys, at least for now. Basically the general idea is Polycount is basically just keeping track of the number of faces that are on an object or a model. And you can see these up here in the top that represent verts, faces, tries, objects, lamps, all that kind of stuff. But we're looking specifically at faces. Tries you can also look at, but if you're a beginner, let's just worry about faces for now and call it there. But going further into this topic real quick, I just want to say Polycount is a very extremely important thing that must be kept track of as we build models. The main reason is because the Polycount has pretty decent influence on game engines as well as animations. Game engines more so than animations, obviously. For those of you who aren't very well aware of this, imagine you're trying to do one task, but that task has, let's say, there's two different tasks. One has basically 4 things to do, whereas another one has 4,000 things to do. Let's assume it takes the same amount of time to do each task as well, so there's no, but what if this is shorter? You get me here. So, obviously the one that's got 4,000 tasks is going to take the longest time, and significantly longer. So, this basically applies to game engines and animations. More so game engines than animations, though. But really the most important thing is we want to keep our poly counts low to the point where our game engines aren't suffering massive frame rate drops, but at the same time a poly count high enough that satisfies not only our art style, but at the same time a level of detail that is not only appealing but satisfactory for the the player. So it's kind of in a sense, a caveat. Not caveat, caveat. I don't know why I messed up that word there, so apologies for that. So, anyway, general idea is this. Keep your poly counts low. It's okay to go high. But know that if you go too high, it's not going to be a very usable model, per se. You can do it for rendering. Now, I should probably mention, the reason why we get away with it more in animation than Game Engine is Game Engine does all the calculations for translations, rotations, and scaling in real time, which means as the player is viewing it. if the game engine has to do all these calculations, and I mean a significant amount in a small period of time, that's where the lag comes in. That's where the frame rate drops. That's where all the things that pretty much would kill a game would start to apply if we have a very high polycount model. Animations aren't very a concern because all that calculation is being done in the rendering process. What the user or the viewer will see once the animation is done is the fully finished render, which is at that point just a video of the models being used and in their, basically the film. So with animations, you can get away with it a bit more because you're going to have a computer dedicated to processing that basically not at real time. So there's the advantage of real-time rendering versus pre-rendered scenes. It's also part of the reason why a lot of game engines probably don't have, or a lot of games themselves don't have real-time renders. It's because it's going to put a significant impact on the game engine. But now, I think that for what we've talked about here with Polycount, that's probably enough for now. We might get in a little bit more into it if we get into the advanced modeling portion. So, but anyway, I just wanted to have this kind of idea and understanding of it in your head as we get further and further along these tutorials. So, I'm going to do a real quick tutorial of the transformations from episode 1, just to make sure that you guys remember, it's fresh in your memory, and you guys remember each individual bit and piece at this point. So, obviously we have our first one, translation, which is the G key, or the translate button up here in the top left. This allows us to freely move the object in 3D space as we see fit. Now remember that these three operations, translate, rotate, and scale, can be done on an axis by pressing the X key, which will represent our red bar, our red line we have on our grid here. We have the Y axis, which is our lovely green line here, and our Z, which is the blue that has just appeared and said hello. We can confirm or basically commit to these changes by clicking or pressing enter. If we don't want to do that for say, if we want to cancel it, we can press escape or commit and then undo. Either way is fine, doesn't really matter. So that was translation. Rotation, by clicking here or pressing the R key, is fairly straightforward. You all know what it does. As well as scale or the S key. We all know this one as well. So, alright. So, what I'm going to do is introduce a few of the tools that are done in modeling that I like to use. Now, I'm not going to use all the ones that are available, and there's even more if you were to include add-ons. But, I'm only going to use the ones, or show you guys the ones that I use frequently, that I like to use, and really that's about it. Now, the one thing I want to point out here is, even though I'm not using certain tools, does not mean they're bad. I'm more than certain some of these tools that I won't be using are powerful. They just have to be used in the right situation, as are most of the tools in this software alone. So, alright. So, one of the fun things we're going to do today to kind of give you, help you walk through this tutorial is, for those of you who are fans of Hyperdimension Neptunia, we're going to basically go through Neptune's D-pad hair clips. You guys should all know, okay, the guys that are viewing this that know this character, you'll know what I'm talking about. I'll put a photo up anyway for those who don't know, so you can see what I'm talking about here. So, one thing to mention right off the bat is this box is taller than I want it to be for the model. So, what I'm going to quickly do in object mode, since I want to keep that basically the cube's point of the center point at it where it is, I'm going to do it in object mode. So I'm going to scale, and I'm going to scale against the Z. That will allow us to strengthen it to the right size that we want. So I'm going to say about, right here's good. That looks good to me. So now, we're going to go and actually edit individual pieces of this. So what we need to do is, if you remember here, we go down to this corner and press edit mode. And that'll put us into this mode, which will pretty much illuminate the entire box. Now, something I need to cover real quickly. There are several ways to select individual pieces. Obviously, we've got the three modes here: vertices, edge, and face. Face selects 4 points. Edge selects 2, and vert selects individual ones. So we can pick one like this. If we do edge, we'll grab 2 verts, as you can see if we switch modes here. And face, we'll grab 4 verts. Also keep a check when Polycount is considered, well, the faces counter that we have up here counts only faces that have, well, basically, actually, no, I don't know where I was going with that, now think about it. Ignore that comment. So, alright, I want to go ahead and begin teaching, or at least showing you guys some of the tools I like to use. So, something I'm going to quickly do real quick, for now, is bring a second version of this out. The first tool I'm going to show you, or at least the first 2 tools I'm going to show you, need kind of a side-by-side comparison. So what I'm going to do real quickly is explain these two. So they're actually these 2 guys right here, Subdivide and Loop Cut and Slide. Subdivide, if you could kind of break it apart, you can figure out what it does. Basically, it divides whatever you have selected into basically even subsections. How many of those subsections you want depends on what you want to... Basically depends on the values you pass in. So if I were to, for example... I'm going to face mode here. I will go ahead and just select this entire guy. Actually. So, I will go ahead and press Subdivide. And you can kind of see, Subdivide divides the entire model into a basically even amount, or well, not really even amount. It divides it into an even number of evenly spaced out subsections. So these are the same size all around in every direction. Basically a symmetrical object. Same thing here. It's symmetrical this way, obviously, and no, it's symmetrical both ways. But they're evenly, what's the word I'm looking for? Evenly sized. They're the same size for all ways around. Now, of course, Neptune's D-clip here is is more of a cross shape. So we need something like this. And this is ideally what we want. But there is one problem I have with this, and this is where I want to get into talking about subdivision versus loop cut and slide. As I mentioned earlier, polycount is kind of an important thing. Not necessarily for something as simple as this, obviously, but it's still good to keep it as low as possible. So, one thing I do want to point out is we won't be needing these 4 pieces. So, they'll go away eventually, but the problem we're going to have is when we get down to here. We don't need this many faces down here, since this is just going to be pretty much a straight flat wall. That's not a concern for us, so it's kind of unnecessary to have this many faces. So, what makes loop cut and slide so different? Well, instead of manually basically dividing this face, or just the model itself, into subsections that are evenly spaced out, loop cut and slide gives us full control. So as you can see, I can set the line where I want, if I want to. So, how to do this is by either going over here, clicking loop cut and slide, or pressing Control and R, and hovering over an edge. This, whatever edge you hover over will basically draw a line that is basically intersecting with it, and it'll go all around the model, just like how our subdivisions over here did. Now, something that is nice is the fact that we basically have full control of where we want to cut, or basically divide. Now, as mentioned earlier, we want to keep this cross shape. So, our problem here lies we have one line. Now, we don't want to do what I did earlier, which is trying to set those individually, because that could cause some problems with if they're not, you know, evenly spaced out. So what do? If your mouse has a mouse wheel, you can actually scroll up on the mouse wheel, and you can increase the number of basically cuts you make across the surface. It'll still wrap around like the previous one did, but it gives you that ability to keep them evenly spaced. So what we're going to do is, to get that cross shape, we need to get 2 loop cuts and slides. Now, the first time you click it, I'll go ahead and show you here. The first time you click it, it'll say, okay, we're going to put a cut here, but we're not done. You can see if you move your mouse up and down here, or side by side, depending which area you did, you can move that line across that face that you plan to cut into whatever subsection you want. If you don't want that, then what you either need to do is this. You can press escape, and that'll lock it in the middle, in the exact center of the model, or you can redo that exact operation and then just double click. That will do just the same thing. But we need that cross shape here, so again, I need to use the scroll wheel and give us that cross shape. Now, the difference comes on the side here. A lot less faces than our subdivision counterpart over here, which is really our ideal, basically what we're wanting. So we don't want this, but we'll take this guy without a... we don't want this one, but we'll take this one without a problem. I realize now that my recording software doesn't keep track of my mouse, so I'm constantly clicking so you guys can keep track of where I am in this regard. So we're going to go with this guy because it's a lot less faces to worry about. And it's really better to have this than this one, since at our current point we really don't need anything too high detail. So what I'm going to do is quickly select all of this mesh. Now, I probably should mention this real quickly, so let's go ahead and get to this quickly. There are multiple ways to do selections. And the first one I want to point out here is we have our basic selection, which is just right-clicking. That selects one individual piece, whether it be an edge, a face, or a vert. If you want more than one, you can press right-click, and then from there on out, press and hold Shift and right-click again, allowing you to select more than one edge or point or face. Pretty useful if you're only looking for a few quick selections. If you want something a bit more... I'll do this in face mode so it's easier to see it. If you want something that's a lot more linear and you'd rather not do the individual clicks, so say I want everything from this one to this guy over here, I can click this one right here, press and hold Control, and then click to their arm end face, and it will pretty much grab everybody in between those two individual pieces. This is useful if you want only a certain amount, but it's too many for a shift click or too time consuming for a shift click. Keep in mind, Blender's pathfinding isn't the greatest, so you may not get what you want. So as you see here, it gave us an S, where instead I might have wanted that. To do that problem, you might just have to do a double control click. You will be able to chain these to select as many as you want, which is pretty handy. So, and moving on to the next version of selection, say we want everything here. We want all the three here, we want these three here, we want these three, we want the back three here, and the under three. That's a lot to shift click, and that's a lot to also control click. So how can we quickly do that? Let's select one that we want, press and hold the Alt key, and click on the edge in the direction that we want to select. So if we want all the ones here, we can click on this edge, or this edge with our Alt key pressed down, and that will basically do a loop selection, grabbing everything we want. This, unfortunately, cannot be chained. At least I haven't noticed a way to chain it. Oh, no, it can be. Never mind. I take that back. You press Shift and Alt. And that'll give you everything you need there. So, that's what you would do there. Now, the very last one I want to point out, which is also extremely dangerous, if you're not careful, is the marquee selection. This one is done by pressing B. You'll get that little you're going to be basically able to click and then drag and make a square. Now say we want to select the whole model this way. If we do that and let go, we can see we grab our top 9. However, we didn't grab anybody on the bottom or the sides, so you have to be very careful with this one. In fact, if you want to select the entire model this way, it actually would be easier to click this, press Control, and then press L. That will select the entire linked object that you want. Then you can do what you want with it. However, if you forget that one, an alternate way to select everything, there's an icon right about where this 3D cursor is right now. That's called Limit Selection to Visible. In Maya, there's another version of this called Camera-Based Selection. What this does is, with this off, or with this on, we can only select the faces or edges or verts that our camera can see. And do whatever we want with them, as I almost just did there. But with this turned off, we can select, with the marquee selection, the entire model. So if I were to turn it off again, you can see the entire model is selected. Be careful with this if you're trying to do single selections, because it can be hard to click this one, which is the top piece, or select this one, which is actually the bottom piece. So be careful if you're doing single-based selections with that off. You might not be grabbing what you're thinking. So, anyway, that's all for the selections bit. Let's go ahead and move out of this real quickly. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of him. We don't need him. So let's go ahead and take care of that for now. So I'm going to move our lovely little friend back over here for now. And we're going to get on with what we were. So that was Subdivision and Loop and Cut that we've just recently talked about before the selection tips that I was showing you here. So the next one I want to point out to you guys is actually one called basically just Delete. You saw me just do it a few seconds ago. Delete, there's multiple ways to call this, basically to utilize this tool. You've got, of course, the Delete button over here, which if you click that, brings a drop down, which might be terrifying, but I'll show you guys in a second. Or you can press the X key or the Delete key itself. Either of those are fine. So the reason why I'm going to show you a few things of why there's a drop down here is because with this particular tool, it changes depending on what you have selected. So I'll show you quickly what happens. So we're in face mode right now, as you can see with the dot in the middle of each of these little squares. If we were to select a face, press the Delete key, the X key, or go over there and click the Delete button, and we go click here and click the face. We delete literally that face from the model. Now, with this being the D-pad, we want just the cross. We don't want these remaining pieces that we still see here. So, face not necessarily is going to be the greatest one here. So, let's try an edge. So let's grab this edge right here, press Delete, and press, if we press face, it's just going to do the same thing if a face was selected. So, if we do this and then click the face, it actually doesn't do anything. So, make sure that if you're deleting an edge, you're aiming for the edges here. So let's delete the edge. Well, that got rid of that face, but we still have the problem of these two here. The easiest way to delete all of these real quickly is actually to figure out what vertex we don't really need. And what I mean by this is, with the cross, we need this guy, and this guy, but not him, or him, because they're the ones that are actually creating the face that connects these three to him. So if we were to go over here and delete the vertices, that gives us our ideal shape that we're looking for. So if we were to go around and do this for all the remaining ones, and remember I'm just shift right clicking these, we can get actually the shape the ideal shape we're looking for. This cross formation. Which is pretty neat, honestly. So, that is pretty cool to do. Now, we do have a problem now. We've got a hole in the middle of our D-pad here. Most of the D-pads I've checked recently don't have holes in the middle like you see here. So, that brings us, conveniently, to our next tool, which is called the Make Edge / Face. This was pretty self-explanatory. Honestly, the name of the tool itself does basically what it says. An edge, as you remember, is done by selecting 2 points. It's a line that connects the two together. So if we were to select these two right now, press F or click that button, you can see a line was just drawn between the two. If we were to select 4 points and press either the F button or the button over here, we create a face that is usable from here on out. Now, we could go and select all 4 here for the rest of the time and keep individually pressing F or make edge face, but that could be a little time consuming, especially if you have a rather large hole you're patching up here. This one isn't so large, obviously, since it's just 7 holes we need to patch. But I'll show you something that's really handy with the make face tool here. So say we didn't have these faces either. In this case, if we want to make sure that we get this done quickly, what we can do is go back to vertex mode, grab the two of the vertices here that came off of one of the completed faces, and just press F all the way. We can literally just chain this command all the way across the D-pad and close it up nicely. Extremely helpful for larger circles, trust me. So now we have the D-pad we're looking for, which is fantastic. Something we desperately need here. So now, as you could probably imagine, we know the D-pad needs to have its little box shape that is kind of right in the middle of right here. So how do we control that? Well, unfortunately, to add a detail like that, we need to also control some of the loops, or make some additional faces here. So what we're going to do is utilize a tool we've already done, which is the loop, cut, and slide, or Control R. Probably already recognize this guy already. So I'm going to scroll up on the mouse wheel to give us a second line to work with. Double click so it stays basically like a subdivision without going nuts down here. Do the same thing on both sides. This will give us these rectangles to work with. Ooh, that was funny. Now, one thing we also know is this isn't taking up the entire little piece, directional pad here. So what we need to do is utilize loop, cut, and slide again to kind of just eyeball roughly where that inner rectangle would be. So go ahead and press spin this time now, just kind of using loop, cut, and slide or Control R, and just kind of eyeballing where that rectangle should be. Don't worry about them being symmetrical. You don't have to worry about that for now. Just try to see if you can aim for it. About right there. And these two right here. Okay, cool. I'll give you guys a second here if you need it. Alright, cool. So now we have this inner rectangle to work with. Now the problem we have is it's kind of sunken in a little bit, if you know what I mean. And if we were to try and translate that down, it actually bends the entire, basically the entire top part of this D-pad, which we don't want. So how do we solve this problem? This is actually solved by using a tool called Extrude, which is right here. You can access this one by pressing this button, and then pressing Extrude Region, or by just simply pressing the E key. What this will do is it will duplicate the face and any linked ones, and allow you to basically extrude it out of the model. So you can kind of see we've just made a few faces to work with. And this is actually extremely powerful if you can use it correctly. Now, that doesn't help us entirely because that goes up, right? So what we need to do is we need to go in. Extrude can do that as well. So if we were to select our 4 inner rectangles here, press our E key or the extrude button, and then actually just simply take the mouse down. You can see we actually kinda basically sink the face into the model itself. So now you guys can kind of see the D-pad is coming together here. It's extremely useful if you can get used to figuring out what extrude needs to be used for. It also can be used for basically popping a model out and kind of allowing quick transformations that are needed. So if we want to bridge, like let's say an arch or something, you can extrude and rotate. I can show you that, guys, a bit more later on. But for now, you guys can kind of see how this is now extremely useful. So if we were to go to object mode, you guys can kind of actually start to see the D-pad a bit here. Now, what I do want to point out, there is a circle bit that's right here. For the sake of this tutorial, I'm not going to cover that today. But know that we will cover it eventually. Now, there are still two more quick tools I want to go over. And that is duplicate. Well, the next one is duplicate. So, if you recall in our first episode, I mentioned something about the importance of object mode versus edit mode. And when it comes to adding meshes or new objects. If the same rules in this case will apply if you use the duplicate command. Duplicate is actually one of the few tools that is available in both object and edit mode. Object mode, it's located here. In edit mode, it's located right here. You can access both of these by using the hotkey Shift-D. Now, as the same rules I mentioned apply with object mode versus edit mode. If we were to duplicate it, press the axis we want to expand that out of, so I'll do the Y one here in this case, and slide it over here by just moving the mouse, we have two separate objects because we did this in object mode. However, if we were to go into edit mode and take there's actually one important thing I want to point out here. Make sure if you're wanting to copy an entire model here, you have the entire model selected. Now there's two ways to do this. As I've mentioned, we already have the Control L method, which I mentioned earlier. That'll do just great. But there's also the A button. Now the A button, when something is selected, will deselect it immediately. This goes for everything that you have selected. So let's say we do the marquee tool selection here. Selected all these pieces, we press A, they're all gone. So we won't be able to do any operations. But if you press A again with nothing selected, the entire shape is selected. This also is applied to object mode, but be careful with that one because you could select everything on your scene. For example, in this case, we would select the cube, the lamp, and the camera, and that could cause some serious problems for us here. So, what we do is we make sure that we only grab what we need to mess with. So now that we have the entire object selected, press Shift-D again, and I'm going to press Y. Slide him over here, and now we have two versions, or two clones of the D-clips. And since we did it in object mode, they're both considered as one pair, rather than two individual objects. Now, as I mentioned earlier with the duplicate key, or with the duplicate tool, it will duplicate what is selected. So if we only have this face selected when we go to duplicate, it's only going to select and duplicate him. So make sure whatever you want duplicated, you've got the entire bit selected. This includes if you try doing the marquee selection, because there are things you will not notice that you'll see that aren't selected. And now you'll get some weird looking models that way too. Trust me. So, that is the end of duplicate. Last one I want to show, I'll show in a second. Let me get this out so you guys can see the two clips again. So we've got Neptune's two clips, but we're not finished with them because, as I mentioned earlier, there's a circular piece. We'll cover that later. The last piece I want to cover is a tool called Knife. So let's go look at this guy real quick. So in object mode, we can't use it because it's not a object mode tool. Knife is right here. Knife is basically a much more loose step out from loop cut and slide. Not only do you have the ability to put the loop where you want, like loop cut and slide, with knife, you can literally put it anywhere you want and draw the line wherever you see fit. Like so. And you can chain this as much as you want, making the weirdest possible shape you could imagine out of this, to the point where some other guy is crying. So that's pretty creepy looking. Now there is a huge danger with using the knife tool, and that is a problem that I call the hidden vert problem. For example, we think we've selected a nice spot. It may look like we originally were on the line, but as you can see here, we're not. What can happen if you're not careful, as you can see, there's that point there. We got lucky here and it didn't attach itself to this plane, but that point exists in memory and will cause some problems with UVs if we're not careful. Especially, for example, if these two are connected and going in like this. Or worse, these three are connected as a face. You can't see that face, can you? You can see it a little bit here with this line. But it is a very dangerous tool to use if not used correctly. So exercise some extreme caution when you're using this one. But it is a very powerful tool if you use it correctly, as you can get some pretty interesting looking shapes here. So, alright guys, that will do it for today's modeling or Blender Basics video. I hope you guys are enjoying this series as it comes out. I know it is slow, and I apologize again for that, but I think that, you know, if I take the time and make sure I know what I'm going to cover in each of these videos, you guys will be able to figure out a lot of new little tips and tricks and be able to make models of your own if you want. Now, there are a few that I think you guys could potentially do at this point. One of these can be, for example, a plate. Like a simple, like either a teacup plate or a, I wouldn't say a paper plate, just like a standard, like a china or porcelain plate. You can easily do that one. You guys can try to do something fancy with the D-clips. You can go something further than that. And maybe even try... You guys could potentially try maybe even... I'm looking around at my desk right now for anything that might work. You guys could potentially do a water bottle, even. Or a Coke, like a soda bottle. Any of the following there. You could do that. I actually encourage you to try some of those out if you can find something in your room or at your home that you could easily try to model here. Now, if you get stuck, for those of you who know, I have a Discord. You are more than welcome to join the Discord. I'll put it in the description below. You're more than welcome to join that and contact me. I will take a look at your model and kind of figure out what's wrong with it, if something is going on, and kind of help guide you in the way you need it to go. So feel free to reach out to me if you get stuck. Again, Discord link will be in the description below. So anyway guys, thanks again for watching, and I will see you on the next video or stream that I make. Until then, see you guys later.